Athens. When you hear that name, what comes to mind? Probably marble temples, maybe philosophers, the birth of democracy, right? But the story of this city, the cradle of Western civilization, it's not just one straight line of glory. It's this incredible, dramatic cycle of rising, falling, and being reborn.
I mean, think about it. How did this one single city end up shaping so much of our world? How did its ideas about government, science, and art become the foundation for so much of what we do thousands of years later? Well, that's what we're going to dive into.
Because here's the thing you have to understand about Athens. Its history isn't some steady climb to the top. It's more like a roller coaster. We're talking unbelievable highs, absolutely crushing lows, and this amazing, stubborn ability to just keep coming back. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's look at the birth of this Athenian ideal and figure out how this city went from being, just another town to pioneering a completely revolutionary way for people to govern themselves. Okay, so people have been living in this area for a long time, like 9,000 years. It even became a pretty important Mycenaean city. But then, around 1100 BC, something really interesting happened. The whole Bronze Age world was collapsing. Empires were just vanishing. But while everyone else was falling apart, Athens survived. It went through a dark age, sure, but it came out the other side, ready for something new. For centuries, Athens was an oligarchy, which basically means a handful of powerful, wealthy families were calling all the shots. All the power was at the very top, and decisions were made to help them, not the average person. As you can imagine, that created a lot of tension, and it was the perfect setup for a totally radical new idea. And that idea was democracy, or demokratia. The word itself tells you everything. It comes from demos, the people, and kratos, power. Power to the people. It sounds simple to us now, but back then, it was a mind-blowing concept that regular citizens, not just the elites, should have the real power to run their own city. So how'd they actually pull it off? Well, in 508 BC, the statesman named Cleisthenes came up with some brilliant reforms. First, and this was the real game changer, he completely broke the power of the old families. He did it by reorganizing everyone into new tribes based on where they lived, not who their relatives were. This shattered all the old loyalties. Then he set up the Council of 500, so more citizens could have a say in the laws. And finally, as a kind of safety valve, he introduced ostracism, a way for people to vote to kick out anyone who got a little too big for their britches. And just like that, the world's first democracy was born. These reforms kicked off Athens' most legendary era, the Golden Age. This was a time of such incredible achievement that it's still echoing today. Under the leadership of a guy named Pericles, Athens just exploded. We're talking a complete flowering of culture and power. The Parthenon, that architectural wonder, went up on the Acropolis. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato were literally just walking around the agora, questioning everything and laying the groundwork for Western thought. Theater became this incredible art form, and the whole thing was funded by a massive Athenian empire that ruled the seas. But you know how it goes. When you're that powerful, you make enemies. And Athens' biggest rival, Sparta, was getting very, very nervous. What followed was the Peloponnesian War, a brutal, long, and devastating conflict that brought the entire Golden Age crashing to an end. That defeat wasn't just a setback. It was the start of a long, painful slide. For almost 2,000 years after this, Athens would lose its independence, falling under the thumb of one empire after another. First up were the Macedonians. Philip II and his son Alexander the Great rolled in, and just like that, the great democratic experiment was over. Done. The city was still a respected center for culture, sure, but its power to decide its own fate, that was gone for good. Next came the Romans, and they were a little different. They conquered Greece, but they were huge fans of Athenian culture. They kind of saw Athens less as a political threat and more like the world's greatest university. Wealthy Romans would send their sons there to get an education, which actually helped preserve its intellectual legacy. As the Roman Empire changed into the Byzantine Empire, a new force, Christianity, totally reshaped the city. The center of the world shifted to the new capital, Constantinople. And Athens, well, it slowly just faded into a quiet provincial town. Its ancient temples were even turned into churches, which is a pretty powerful symbol of how much things had changed. Then, in the 15th century, the Ottoman Turks took over. For them, Athens wasn't a center of learning. It was a strategic military base, and its beautiful ancient landmarks, the very symbols of its past glory, were repurposed for war. And if you need one single image to show you just how far the city had fallen, this is it. The Parthenon, the ultimate symbol of the Golden Age, was turned into a storage shed for gunpowder. You can probably guess what happened next. In 1687, during a siege, a mortar shell from the Venetian army scored a direct hit. The explosion was catastrophic. It blew the roof off, gutted the building, and left it in ruins. It's really hard to imagine a lower point in the city's entire history. But hey, remember our theme, rise, fall, and rebirth? Because after hitting absolute rock bottom, Athens was about to stage its most dramatic comeback ever. When Greece finally won its independence from the Ottomans in the 1830s, Athens was just a ghost of its former self. Seriously, its population was only about 10,000 people. It was basically a small town huddled around these magnificent ruins.
And yet, that's exactly why it was chosen to be the capital of the new Greek nation, because of that powerful symbolic history. Fueled by this new purpose, the city was completely reborn. It underwent huge development, becoming a modern European capital. And in a perfect full-circle moment, it hosted the very first modern Olympic Games in 1896.
So that brings us to the modern era, and to this incredible, enduring legacy of Athenian resilience.
And look, the last century has not been easy. Athens has been through a brutal occupation in World War II, a civil war, and a major economic crisis more recently. And yet, through all of that, that same spirit of renewal, that refusal to quit, has just kept on going. This quote, I think, just captures it perfectly. The story of Athens isn't just about its ancient past. It's about this unbroken spirit of resilience, this constant ability to reinvent itself that has never, ever been extinguished. So, what's the big takeaway here? The story of Athens is so much more than a history lesson. It's this timeless story about endurance. It leaves us with a pretty big question, I think. What can we all learn from a city that has managed to rise from its own ashes time and time again?